Hello everyone, this is Lisa Netzer coming back to you with more information about Minnesota's paid leave program. This is a summer update to the videos available on the True North Practice Transition website. These updates are based on the spring changes from the Minnesota legislature and also new information from the Minnesota Paid Leave Department. So without further ado, let's talk about this short items we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about supplemental benefits and specifically the idea of supplementing your wages with PTO while you're on paid leave. We'll also talk about the need to appoint an administrator to help you handle Minnesota paid leave, and also the increase in the premium that was passed by the legislature this past spring. Let's talk about PTO and Minnesota paid leave. In watching the previous video, you know that Minnesota paid leave has a maximum benefit of around $1,340 per week. It's around that number because those numbers are going to get reset based on the average weekly wage in Minnesota as measured in November of this year. And it's going to change every year, so it's a bit of a moving target, but starting at about $1,300 is a good place to start. For some employees, it makes sense for them to use their PTO for part of the time they're gone so that they can get 100% wage replacement rather than just partial wage replacement while they're on leave. For example, let's say an employee would like to take 12 weeks of leave. They have 2 weeks of PTO saved up, and they want to use that at 100% of their wage replacement. That means that you would pay that employee PTO, and then after the PTO runs out, Minnesota paid leave would cover the rest of the time that they are away. So there you're using one or the other, PTO or paid leave. However, there is a situation where employees could supplement their pay for Minnesota paid leave with PTO. This is how that looks. If you have the same employee who has 12 weeks coming up of leave and they have 2 weeks of PTO, they could try to use partial days of PTO to cover that wage gap between what Minnesota paid leave would pay them and what their 100% of their wage would be. So in other words, instead of saying 2 weeks of one type of leave and 10 weeks of the other, you would literally figure out to the day and the hour how much PTO would need to be paid out each day to get that employee back to 100% their wages. So you would have some time that's covered by Minnesota paid leave, and then 0.7 of a day or 0.45 of a day or things like that, depending on what that employee's wage is. In other words, you need an administrator who can figure out what portion of a PTO day would be necessary to bring someone up to their 100% wages. And that's using PTO to supplement the benefit of Minnesota paid leave. Now, if that sounds really complicated to you, the first thing I need to let you know is that you do not have to do this. It is not required, but you do need to say then in your employee handbook that you will not provide supplemental benefits. That is the key language to get into your employee handbook. So you can say, listen, I'll pay PTO if you want to use it while you're out on paid leave, but I'm not going to use it as a supplemental benefit to what paid leave provides. That's totally up to you. If you are okay with doing those calculations, let's say you already pay out PTO for a partial amount of time, or you're already calculating it per hour, maybe it's not that big of a deal to you, and you can offer supplemental benefits. Either way, it should be clear from your handbook what you allow your employees to do with PTO and Minnesota paid leave. Next issue, you need to assign to someone in your office the role of paid leave administrator. This can be the business owner, it can be an office manager, it can be a senior employee, whoever you think is the best person to manage this. It's important because that paid leave administrator is going to have access about private employee information, including people's reasons for leave and their doctor's documentation. So please think about that when you assign this role. And of course, you just want to make sure they're signing up with the email that you know you'll get notifications on if there's an update from the Minnesota paid leave um, department. So this needs to be filled out. It'd be great to get this done well before January 1 of 2026 and not when it's an emergency because someone wants to request leave and you need 24 hours really to get signed up for the account. So I suggest everyone take care of this in 2025. Pick that person in your office, let them know they're going to be wearing that hat, and talk about how they're going to administer this leave. The final change that came up this spring, it was a change in premium. Previously, the Minnesota legislature had passed a premium of 0.7% on employee wages, and now it's going to be 0.88% going for this next year. And again, how much of that you pay or that your employee pays is up to you. You can pay up to 100%, but you must pay at least 50% of this new employment tax. The best way to see what these numbers look like for you is to go to the premium calculator available on Minnesota Paid Leave's website. So please, again, the information is at the bottom of the screen. Please check out the premium calculator so you know what your payments are going to look like for 2026. And as a small bonus, just want to let you know that Minnesota legislature also passed a new law this spring about breaks, meal breaks and restroom breaks. The language is up on the screen. As you can see, there's not a specific amount of time that is assigned for people to have a break. It is rather sufficient time to eat a meal and adequate time to get to the bathroom. So make sure that your employees are not scheduled with patients so tightly that they can never get away for a restroom or a meal break. But if you have a little bit of leeway between patients and people can utilize the bathroom easily, you're probably not going to be worried about these laws. But just make sure you know they exist and they're out there in the world. All right, everyone, thank you so much for listening to this update. Again, if you have any questions, my contact information is listed below. Feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.